Welcome back to The Journey Unfolds. So, can I just sit with you today and share something with you? I've been sitting with this something for the entirety of this week and last week, and I feel this need to share more about this with you. This is not a strategy, it's not a framework, it's not a five-step plan, it's simply a lesson. One that I have had to learn on repeat. If you don't get it the first time, maybe you will on the 100th or more. And it goes something like this. What if trying harder, what if working harder is not the answer? What if the exhaustion that you're feeling right now is not a sign that you need to push harder? Actually, maybe it's a sign that something needs to change. Maybe it's a sign that it's time to let go of something or someone somehow. That's what today is all about. I'm calling this episode Becoming Childlike Again. And by the end, I think you'll understand why. So I do want to go back in time a little bit. I'm going to share something with you that I don't talk about enough. And in sharing this with you, I know that God's actually asking me to help people who are in the situation or in a similar scenario that I found myself in on repeat over the years. I carried the weight of something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I didn't know the name of it. But the truth is, I was working really hard. I was showing up. I was doing all the things that you're supposed to do as an entrepreneur, including not just my business work, but my mindset work. And yet, financially, if I'm being honest, there was this sort of low grade hum in the background of uncertainty. I could never truly exhale. Every month, I felt this fear with the approaching 30th of each month with property taxes coming out, and it's always a big chunk. And I wondered, are we going to make it? Am I going to have enough? And every month that I confronted this, there was a new layer of shame that I didn't even realize how brutal it was until I saw hindsight 2020. And as a mom, let me tell you, this weight had a specific, unique kind of pain to it. If you're a mom or a dad, a parent, you would understand this, and I encourage you to share it in the comments. But my kids went to a private school. It was really important to us. And the reality of that was that they had many friends who came from affluent families. And I'd watch those families. My kids actually would watch their friends take spring break vacations, Disney cruises, Mexico, ski cabins. And guess what we were doing? Oh, we were staying home. Not because I wasn't working hard enough. In fact, I tried to sugarcoat it. We'll just do lots of crafts. We can make forts. We can have so much fun. Even though behind the scenes, I was like, way to go, Katy. You always wanted to be able to do this for your kids. And here we are. And it was not because I wasn't smart enough or capable enough. It was because the model, the self-expectation that I had was so high and so unattainable that is it any wonder that I was drowning in my own shame? In my business, I just had this naive belief, and I'm at risk of ruffling feathers here in saying this, but there is this idea that if you're going to be a coach, and I refer specifically to coaching here because it's what I did for a long time. But regardless, if you're an online entrepreneur, if you're an entrepreneur in general, the thing is that you're taught that you need to invest constantly, especially in yourself, so that you can become the person that can lead this business. And I agree to that to a point. But what's so frustrating and what I really find myself fighting against is this idea that we need to mindset our way into abundance. We need to manifest it better somehow. That if it's not happening for us, it's because something inside us needs work. In other words, we're broken. So imagine the cycle I found myself in. This idea that not only was I working really hard to prove that I wasn't broken, I was actually confirming that I was by the industry I found myself in. So all the investments I had made in my own coaching, in getting mentors, in leadership training, in all of the things, do I have any regrets? Of course not. But I did have a belief that the better version of me, the stronger, the really successful and financially wealthy version of me was on the other side of all those investments. I didn't know that she was in here all along because I didn't know how to find her. I was buried in my own shame. And when it came to my kids and my son coming home and saying, our house is so ugly after spending the weekend with his buddy who's lives in a multi-million dollar home, I mean, what was I supposed to say? I was doing everything that I knew to do, and it still felt like it wasn't enough. So if you're watching this and you're an entrepreneur and you know that feeling, I'm doing everything right and it's still not working. I want you to understand that this is one of the most quietly devastating experiences that an entrepreneur can have because we're told the cash flow is the blood of your business. But what about if the cash ain't flowing? It's not even just about the money, though. It's about what we make it mean. Here's what I now know, what I realized having learned the hard way is when cash flow gets tight, we don't just feel a little bit stressed. Actually, it cuts deeper. It can create shame. So we feel ashamed. We start making our financial reality mean something about us, about our worth, about our intelligence, about whether God is actually with us. I've often talked about the times yes, plural, times that I have gotten in my truck and pulled over and parked somewhere and screamed and cried like a 2-year-old, saying, God, are you even listening right now? Are you even there? Do you care? You tell me to follow this thing that you put on my heart, and here I am running into the wall over and over and over again. And the pressures and the challenges, and I think about my marriage and how he wanted to believe in me. Of course he did. He wanted to support me. But if month after month after month goes by and I'm not generating enough revenue to bring what we needed in to make it so that we're not drowning, that in itself was a form of pressure because it impacts everything in your life. I believe that obviously I missed the boat. Maybe I got the wrong memo. Okay, God, like, did I get this all wrong? Have I been striving and trying to do this thing the wrong way? Were you actually trying to get me to do something different and I missed the message? What happened here? And once you put so much time and effort and energy into something, the whole idea of having to abandon ship and start over is devastating. But the thing was, I knew I didn't come this far just to come this far. But for the love of all things holy, God, if you wouldn't mind a little help here. So I fell into the trap. If I just work harder, if I invest more money, if I find that right strategy, that perfect solution, if I could just find the right mentor, if I could just implement the right system, everything should click. It'll all make sense. So what did I do? I just kept striving. I kept performing. I kept trying to prove to myself, to my family, to my husband, to God that I'm enough. I can do this. But here's what striving actually does. And yes, I can speak to firsthand experience of this. It exhausts you. It shrinks your creativity. And it's the very thing that sustains shame. It makes you desperate in ways that you can't even see. And it keeps you running on that treadmill that just doesn't care how fast you're going. It just keeps going. In fact, it goes faster and you have to jump off because you can't keep up. That's the feeling. So what changed? Well, a lot of little things have changed over the last year, but it took a lot of breaking down of the old to make room for the new. So on May 26th, just over a month ago, I joined the Legacy Builders program. And almost immediately, the very next day, in fact, and in the weeks to follow, those old fears came right back in. What if this doesn't work? In fact, just this last weekend, I spent some time journaling and crying and just releasing a lot of fear around what if I made the wrong decision again? Was I quick to make this call? But if you were watching those earlier episodes, I was so deep in the trenches of discernment. I knew this was what God wanted for me. Still, what if I just don't have what it takes? What if, what if? What if the dream is just there like a carrot? It's being dangled in front of me, but I'll never actually have it. You know that feeling? It's like, do I even dare hope? And as long as God is in the driver's seat, of course I can have hope. And the only reason I'm still standing and I'm renewed today is because when God leads you to it, He will lead you through it. And I know this to be true. The fears don't disappear. Of course not. In fact, I realized this weekend, as soon as you say yes to God, guess what happens? All the obstacles show up. All the insecurities and fears get louder. And for me, I'm like, dang, I'm supposed to make this incredible impact. Of course, the devil himself is going to try to tear me back down because we can't have that now, can we? So when your fears do get amplified, the question becomes, what do you do with that? So just the other day, I was listening to a guided meditation, and the biblical verse that came up was Matthew 18, verses 1 through 4. I've been sitting with this, and it goes something like this. The disciples came to Jesus and asked him, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus called a little child to him. He placed that child in front of everyone and said, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. I've read that passage before, but this week it hit me different because I think Jesus wasn't just talking about getting into heaven. He was talking about how we're meant to walk through life with the posture of a child. And as I was reflecting on that, I was picturing this innocent, adorable, just lovely child that is curious and looking around and enjoying it all and taking it all in. And I'm like, I want to be that. Think about how that child moves through the world. A child doesn't need to understand how everything works before they take that next step. A child doesn't have to see that whole staircase. You give them a bin of Lego, they're not sitting there going, but how do I do this? They just start building. And a child doesn't perform for love. Well, at least not when they're really young. They don't earn belonging, they don't hustle for significance. A child simply trusts. When they fall, they get back up. They might cry, but they get back up, they keep going. They're curious, they're open, they're dependent. And somewhere along the way, if we're being honest, through years of trying to prove ourselves, provide for our families, build our businesses, manage our fears, we've lost that child version of us. We make it about the accolades, the trophies, the awards, the honor roll, because all of these things somehow butter us up and make us more acceptable. So we stopped being childlike. We started striving instead, and we started performing. Case in point. We started needing to know how everything was going to look before we were willing to take the next step. So I've said it before and I'll say it again. This season, the last year particularly, has been a season of breaking down, removing all of those accolades, awards, etc. Not the things themselves, but what I made them mean about me. It's about stripping the ego and getting to the real core of who I am as a person, in my essence, as a child, really innocent, eager, creative, ready to have fun, love on people. So the turning point for me this week was really a simple realization, and that is this. I might like to think that I could control things. And I can't. I can't control the economy. I cannot control other people's decisions. I cannot control timelines or outcomes or the evidence when it shows up, if it shows up. But I can control one thing, and that is my own obedience, my own posture, my own way of showing up in this world. I can control my willingness. I can control my trust in God, the same God that I've yelled at and cursed at and accused of completely abandoning me. Because actually, He never did. Those feelings were the stripping away of all the mechanisms I put in place unintentionally that distanced myself from Him. And now I know how to focus just on that next step. That's it. That's the whole assignment, to be childlike, not look at that whole staircase and go, how on earth am I going to do this? Just taking the next step. That's all it is. So here's what I know with conviction in my heart. I feel called, deeply called, to use my story to help people break free from financial pressure. If you had told me this would be what I would be doing a year ago, I wouldn't have believed you. At the end of the day, it's not just about financial pressure, is it? It's about emotional, mental, spiritual, physical pressure. I've had enough health challenges to know what that does to a body because financial pressure is so heavy. And freedom, the opposite, it actually creates that space to be childlike, to be creative, to create space for that impact that you want to create. And when it comes to the steps that I'm taking now, as I shared, the fears still show up today, this weekend. They were here, loud and clear, but it's okay to not know. I don't know what the timeline looks like. I don't know when the first person that signs up and joins me with the Legacy Builders program. I don't know. But isn't that the whole point? I just know the conviction. I know God's telling me to show up and be here, even when I feel about this big, because it's about being childlike again. It's letting go of the pride and just taking each step with wonder. So I want to share something with you, and I believe that God does not waste those hard seasons, those wilderness seasons. The years of financial uncertainty that I carried, as you know, they included fear, shame, moments of wondering if God had forgotten about me. Hello. None of that is wasted because now I understand what it feels like to carry that weight. I had to go through that experience to be able to relate to people. I understand what it feels like to be a parent who loves your children so, so much and still wonder, why is it I cannot seem to get ahead enough to give them more? And I'm not talking necessarily about material things. I don't want to just buy my kids stuff. I want to buy experiences. I want to create memories. And we've had some. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here saying we lived this life of utter poverty. But what I am saying is I wanted more for them. I envisioned myself as a mom being able to take the occasional family vacation to Mexico or wherever. And it realistically, with one exception to Hawaii, we just weren't able to make it work. And I understand what it feels like to work so hard. It's not the hard work that's the problem. It's the inability to exhale properly, to feel like you got to keep going, keep going, keep going. And my lungs are responding to that feeling of pressure, as you can tell. And so that understanding my own lived experience is exactly what positions me today to help others find a different path. It's not coming from a place of theory. It's actually coming from a place of having been there and still in many ways living it still to this day. But here's the difference. The beauty of it is I see the possibilities. I see the opportunities and I cannot wait. I cannot wait for it to unfold. Here's the vision that I am holding on to, not just for me, but for you too. What if financial pressure didn't have to be that constant background noise in your life? What if there's a way to create an additional stream of revenue, not by abandoning what you've built, please no, and not by working more hours, but complementing what you're doing by stepping into a different model entirely? What if the answer to your exhaustion is not more effort, but more support? You've heard the phrase, work smarter, not harder. What if there's more possibility for you, more leverage? What if you can take those kids on that vacation and not be stressing about being able to buy your groceries when you get home? That's what I'm exploring right now. And it's what I want for every person that ever watches this video. If you have ever felt this trapped feeling, especially in today's economy, where no matter how hard you work, you can't get ahead of the curve because the prices keep going up. So you might be doing better than you were doing 5 years ago, but inflation just kicked your butt. What do we do then? Here's what I'm leaning into. It's a new possibility. It's a way to take our power back, and not in the egotistical kind, but in the kind where it's God-given and we're able to be the co-creators of our life and our ways of making money and honoring God while we do so. So here's the truth. You are not broken. You are not behind. You're not failing. And you just might be carrying way too much right now that you were never meant to carry. And maybe, just maybe, this is the season that God's inviting you into something new, something to take the pressure off. And maybe He's asking you to be more childlike again, to be more curious, to be trusting and open to a different way. If any of today's episodes has resonated with you, the exhaustion, the striving, the feeling that you're doing everything right, but it's still not enough, I want to invite you to explore something with me. I'm including a free resource in the description below called the Freedom Formula Blueprint. It walks you through a different approach to creating income, one that doesn't require you to put in more hours, more hustle, or starting from scratch even. You can grab it, growwithkaty.com. Don't forget, my name is spelled with a Y, growwithkaty.com. No pressure, no pressure at all, just possibility. And as you go out this week, I want to leave you with one quick question. What if God is not asking you to try harder or to work harder? What if He's simply asking you to let go and trust more? Be curious, be childlike, and keep taking that next step in faith, even when you cannot see the full picture. But God can, and He'll guide you each and every step of the way. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.